What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Mets Central podcast. As I realized, I forgot to start on Twitter, but the Mets take 3 out of 4 against the Philadelphia Phillies, setting the table now for what we all expected and we've talked about for weeks now, upon weeks, that it was going to come down to this. The House of Horrors. The Mets will head to Atlanta with a 2-game lead, which could have been worse because the Mets easily could have dropped that last game, easily could have dropped a different game in there, and they could have ended up going down there with a 1-game lead, but they avoid what we would have called the worst case scenario, although worse would have been if they got swept by the Phillies and then the Braves end up leapfrogging them. But now the Mets set themselves up in a good spot to where they just got to win 2 games. But it's very similar to the last time they were in Atlanta and they had an opportunity to get a tiebreaker, and that was they had to win, I think, 1 game, and they couldn't even do that. But we're going to talk about all of it, if this series even ends up getting played in full, because there's a hurricane going on right now down in Atlanta, so that could implicate things. We'll talk about all of it. Before we do, leave a like on the stream if you do enjoy. Subscribe if you guys are new, especially if you're Mets fans, and turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live on the channel. But yeah, the Mets took care of business, as I like to say, with the Philly series, because I think a lot of the games in here you could easily look at as it kind of balances out the work that they couldn't get done in Philly, especially that last game, because they could have easily won 1 or 2 of those games in Philly, and then who knows, maybe we're talking about the Mets still trying to grab the National League East, but that's not the case. Either way, though, they get the job done. And how are we feeling? How are we feeling, even though we said it for weeks now, it was going to come down to this?
Well, look, we're finally here, right? I mean, you take it back a couple months ago, maybe like 2 months ago, when the Mets were first getting themselves back into the playoff race, and we were looking ahead to the final weeks of the regular season, and we were saying, okay, where is the series that could potentially leapfrog the Mets into the playoffs, or potentially end their season, and this season just ends in total disappointment. And we circled that series as this Atlanta series, and we've been saying now for months and a couple weeks that this was the series that's going to determine it, because for some reason it always does. These two franchises, they always seem to be interconnected, whether it be this year, whether it be 22, whether it be 99 where they faced the NLCS, or whether it be 98 where the Braves knocked out the Mets in the last couple weeks of the regular seasons for them to miss the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, look, the solution is simple. You go in there, you take 2 out of 3, you're in the playoffs. No need to mess around. No need to go in there and only win 1 game. I mean, look, I get it. If you win 1 game, you're still in the driving seat. But do we really want to go into Milwaukee needing to win 2 out of 3 again to really cement the playoff spot? No. Just get it over. Just get it over in the series right now and slay the demons and just get that confidence in this group. Because I'm telling you right now, this group and this team has earned our trust, because they've shown it over the last couple months that they can step up and come up big when they have to. I mean, they just did it against the Philadelphia Phillies, where I would have taken a split before the series started. They go in there and they really show who they are, and they take 3 out of 4. So yeah, but I mean, this is gonna be huge, and I really think that if this team goes in there and takes 2 out of 3 and really shows that this is who they are, I only think that just potentially propel them into a deep playoff run when they eventually do get into the playoffs. But I mean, also going back to it, like a couple months ago when we looked at the series, we were saying that you know if the Mets get into the spot, you're hoping that get there with at least a game back or maybe even tied. Well, you know what? We're even in a better spot because we're up 2 games. It could have been 3 if the Marlins knew how to score with bases loaded and nobody out, but I'm not going to complain further. I thought the Braves were going to sweep the Marlins, so the fact that they even took one off them, I'll take that 100%. But yeah, it's time to take care of business. Like Carlos Mendoza said in the post game interview, it's time for the big boys to come out and play.
Yeah, this is the time. And honestly, we can nitpick that the Marlins couldn't beat the Braves, especially since the Marlins always play the Mets tough. But it is what it is. Now the Mets, I think that it's better this way. I'd rather the Mets be in a scenario where they really have to push to win these games versus it being half-assed, where they're up by 3 and they have a lot of a cushion where, they lose the series to the Braves and it's like, oh, well, you still have a lead over them and you're in a good spot. But for right now, I think this is a better scenario. The thing that I'm more scared about is the games getting moved because, like I mentioned, because I think we're going to talk a bulk about this Atlanta series versus what happened against Philly. So we're kind of going to work backwards from what we usually do. But I think that with this series coming up, there's apparently talks that the Thursday game could be moved to Monday. That is the nightmare scenario because then the Mets have to face Chris Sale twice more likely than not. And if that ends up being the case, that could be a huge problem. But on the flip side of that, if the Mets take care of business either way somehow in these two games, it doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about it. Or even if they take care of business in one and then they handle business in Milwaukee, who's not even going to be trying in that series, maybe there's an opportunity there to where that last game is just completely meaningless and we don't even have to worry about it. The Mets could just go into that last game and it doesn't matter. I still think if the hurricane is that bad, just move the game to a neutral site. I mean, we saw it a couple years ago when the Rays and Yankees, there was a hurricane down in Tampa Bay, and they moved that game despite it being in a dome, that stadium. They moved that to Citi Field, that series, and I'm not saying they have to move it there, but the Houston Astros and Texas Rangers, they're both indoor stadiums, and they both are on the road right now while the Mets are playing the series, so maybe they could go to a neutral site there. I don't know if they're going to do it at this rate. I feel like what's done is done, and they're going to roll with the dice here, but I think it's stupid. But that also could be me saying that I don't want to see Chris Sale twice, but I also just think it is ridiculous how they're even bothering with this. Just move it to a neutral site. Regardless, though, the Mets have to just, like you said, slay their demons, and this is the time to show that you're not just prepared for making the playoffs, you're prepared to go on a deep run in October, because if you take 3 out of 4 like we just saw against the Phillies and you beat the Braves in this series, you're sending a message to the rest of the league that we're not fucking around. Especially if you beat Chris Sale, you show that you could find a way to scrape a win against Zach Wheeler in the recent weeks. You show that you could find a way to beat Chris Sale in the recent weeks. If you show that, you're telling a lot of Met fans at the very least, because the rest of the league won't give a fuck still and will still just look at the Mets as the Mets. But you're sending a message at least to Met fans that you deserve the full confidence. Granted, I have it already right now. Like, as much as I'm nervous for first pitch tonight, I still feel confident going into the series that the Mets are going to get the job done. But this will further elevate the confidence that if they're not hosting games in the wild card, we're going to see them come back for the division series. Like, honestly, I will say it right now. Maybe this is a bad thing to say, that the reason I didn't go to any games in this homestand is because I'm feeling confident that we're going to see them in the division series for a game 3. That's truly how I feel right now. And maybe I shouldn't feel that way, and maybe it's a bad thing, but that's at least how I feel.
No, yeah, I mean, just going back to the point of the hurricane and potentially games not being played and potentially the game being moved to Monday. I think the smartest thing to do, and I don't know why they haven't done it already, is just move it to a neutral site, because they're gonna play tonight. Tomorrow it's gonna be interesting. It's showing rain. I don't know how bad that rain's gonna be, but Thursday it's pretty much they're not gonna play Thursday unless some miracle happens and the hurricane just magically avoids Atlanta. But I think the neutral site makes the most sense. I mean, because I was listening to Evan Roberts, Rico Baronia last night. Anyone who hasn't, make sure to check that out. He does a really good job on that podcast. But he was saying that there's 3 really good options that you could potentially move the game to for a neutral site. You could either go to Milwaukee, because they're on the road right now, and that helps the Mets because then they don't have to travel the next day. They're already there in Milwaukee. Or if you want to stay geographically friendly to the Braves, you could either go down and play in Miami or play in Tampa. And those are two dome stadiums. I mean, 3 because Milwaukee's a retractable roof as well. So there's options, and I don't want to move that game to Monday because that could, like you said, I don't want to face Chris Sale again. But I mean, it's like it could be like a game 163 where it's a one game take all, and I just want to get all these 3 games done with in this series. I don't want to think about a Monday game, but yeah, I think I'm looking at this series, right? I think the first game is crucial for the Mets to win because you look at Schwellenbach's on the mound, and I know Schwellenbach's not a terrible pitcher, but if you look at all three of their pitching matchups, Schwellenbach is the worst one out of all three, because then you have Sale and Max Fried going into game 2 and game 3. But if you take care of game 1 and you win that one, then there's not really a lot of pressure to go into and win game 2 with Chris Sale on the mound. You can kind of say, okay, like, listen, we might lose this game, but there won't be as much pressure. If you lose game 1, now there's immense pressure, because now you have to go out and beat Chris Sale, and then you have to go out and beat Max Fried, two really good left-handed pitchers. So, I mean, for me, whenever I go into a series, I always want to win the first game. I always want to get off on the right track. But this series, and listen, you got Severino on the mound. Severino has been really good the last couple weeks. So go out there. I'm sure Sevy's going to go out there. He's going to give you 6, 7 good innings, maybe give up 2 runs, 3 runs. And the offense, like we've been saying the last 2 series especially, they just got to continue hitting home runs, because that's been the formula so far. It worked against the Nationals. It worked against the Phillies. Now we're going to Atlanta and do the same thing.
Yeah. Before I address all of that with the series, the last thing I'll say with the neutral site thing, MLB, if you could have a World Series play, and I know times were different then, but if the World Series could be played in a neutral site and playoff games could be played on a neutral site, come on. Like, we can't move this series around. I don't know. But regardless, yeah, with the series, I agree that you got to get off on the right footing going against Schwellenbach with Severino on the mound. You really want to put yourself in a good spot. And it's going to be interesting to see offensively how this thing goes down, because we honestly don't even know what is going to happen with Lindor, because Lindor mentioned that he's going to be playing through pain the rest of the season, and they're winning the games without him, but you'd really like that extra boost in this series for him. I don't know if it's going to happen tonight. I really don't think he's going to play tonight, based on the way that we've just been hearing him talk and just the way that the Mets are talking in general about him. I feel like maybe there's a chance he's in tomorrow, especially against Chris Sale. I feel like there's a more likelihood that they'll want to put him in against him. But regardless, I do wonder how this lineup's going to be constructed, because you do have guys that are on a heater right now, but then you also have guys like JD Martinez who can't hit a lick right now. Jesse Winker has been in a bit of a funk lately. Mark Vientos has been streaky lately, which does worry me a bit. But you also do, of course, have Iglesias rolling into the series with his hitting streak. You still have Brandon Nimmo, who's been on fire. Francisco Alvarez, I think it is a must that he plays every game this series, assuming all 3 are played, because obviously if 2 are played and then 1's pushed back, then it's a no-brainer that you play him. But I think even if it means DHing him in that 3rd game and then putting Luis Torrens behind the dish in that 3rd game, go for it. Alvarez needs to be playing every day with the way he's swinging the bat. Tyrone Taylor needs to be in the lineup every day with the way he's swinging the bat. Those are the guys that I really look at. And it's just going to be interesting to see how Mendoza constructs this lineup with this series. And I do find it interesting in general, the pitching matchup with the way they line this up. And I like the way they did. You get Severino versus Schwellenbach. The Sale day, you throw David Peterson in there, who's been struggling, which I don't like to have a quote-unquote punt game in this series, but you probably look at that game mostly as your punt game, because it was either going to be Peterson or Quintana, which I thought they were going to go with Quintana just because he's been pitching well and because of the fact that you want to go with the veteran. But they opted to go with David Peterson, which is interesting. And if Peterson could give the starts that he's gave the majority of the season, then maybe the Mets have a chance to, scrape a win there. But I don't know. You're more likely then to use your better relievers on Tuesday tonight versus Wednesday. And then Thursday, Manaea, who has just been dominant, versus Max Fried. And then you have the opportunity to use your better relievers in that game as well. So I think Mendoza lined it up in that way, which maybe he could have done it the other way too. I don't know. But I think he views that game, mostly Wednesday, as if we win, we win. If we don't, it's Chris Sale, and we have our ace going the last game. But it's going to be interesting to see the way he manages both with the lineup and the pitching, because we saw him get very aggressive in this series against the Phillies, and I expect that to carry over even more in this Atlanta series.
So I think best case scenario, listen, with Lindor, I think there is a chance we do see him play tonight. If we do see him play tonight, though, I think best case scenario is you take the first 2 games, you cement the playoff spot, and then you just rest them the rest of the series. You don't play them against the final game against Atlanta, and then you just don't let them play the last 3 games against the Brewers. I think that's best case scenario, and I think that's the same thing with Francisco Alvarez. You put him in the first 2 games. Hopefully, you win them. You spent the playoff spot, and then you could either completely rest them or just DH him a couple games. I think though because I know a lot of people have been talking about like if Lindor comes back, how do you do the defensive alignment? Where does Acuna go? I think the solution is simple. I think obviously Lindor, if he comes back, you're starting shortstop. You move Acuna over to second base. You move Iglesias over to third. So you really cement your infield defense. And with JD Martinez struggling, you sit him on the bench and you move Mark Vientos in as your DH. I think that is the ideal defensive alignment and batting order thing that you want. I think that's at least how you're going to maximize what you have on the roster so far. Because JD Martinez right now, listen, I love JD Martinez. He was a huge spark and a big reason why the Mets really got into this playoff race in the first place. But we have to be honest. I mean, the guy's 0 for his last 32. And it's not like he's having competitive at bats to the plate right now. He looks really bad every time he goes up there. So for me, you got to sit him, let him maybe. I mean, I think this is an age thing. Just let him get some rest, and hopefully, he's one of those guys, one of those clutch guys in the playoffs that just comes off the bench in a big pinch hitting opportunity and gets you, a big home run, a big 2-run RBI double. That's at least what I'm hoping for. But yeah, really like I said before, the hope is you win your first 2 games here in Atlanta, and then you could just rest guys.
Yeah, and it sucks with JD because this was like the time of year where you thought this was the bat we needed, like because Vientos was an afterthought in March when they got JD Martinez, and we were like, all right, well Vientos isn't going to really get much playing time. Then JD Martinez is the DH, and now it's kind of been the opposite right now. And it sucks, it really does. But I agree that you wouldn't be in the spot without him. But I think he's honestly someone that's the opposite, where everyone's talking about, oh, just play him because he's going to get into a rhythm at some point. He's just one of those guys. I think based on what we've seen this year quite a bit, he's better the opposite, because there are a lot of times where after an off day, he ends up coming back into the lineup and he goes 2 for 4. After the baby comes back after, sitting out 3-4 days, and he goes like 2 for 4, I'm pretty sure, that day as well. So there are plenty of instances where sitting him has been a lot better, and maybe let him just sit in the dugout, let him watch some film on himself, and maybe that could help turn things around. But for right now, he's played himself out of a spot, and it's the unfortunate reality, but he does not deserve to be in the lineup right now with the way he's playing. And I agree that maybe the Milwaukee series, if you're able to just get this done and then bench guys, just play JD every game of that Milwaukee series, and at that point, and maybe that will help him a bit get into the rhythm. I know I said it's the opposite, but if he's sitting right now and then he plays that Milwaukee series, maybe it's a little bit of a combination of both there, where you are letting him get those at bats and then he's also getting his rest that he needs. But yeah, right now the lineup that I'm going with is exactly what you said, assuming Lindor's there, and then I would probably put Iglesias right now in the 2-hole because he's hitting so well, and I know it's tough with Nimmo heating up, but Iglesias has been unbelievable. You could go with him there, and then you put Nimmo third, and I think you got a solid 1, 2, 3 in the order, and you still have Acuna, who's just been raking. Leave him ninth. I think he's comfortable there. Leave him ninth, and you kind of have that double leadoff thing going for you, where Acuna gets on, and then you get back to the top of the order, and you get 3 guys in a row that have been hitting well, and then you could figure out the rest there. Some combination of Vientos, Alonso, Taylor up there, even since he's been hitting well. You got a lot of options right now, and I feel comfortable with whatever they do because Mendoza, for the most part, has hit the right buttons a lot. So we'll see how that carries over. But yeah, offensively, they're going to have to continue to thrive in this series, especially if they could, again, find a way to win that second game even more so. That would just be huge. But do you have anything to add with the Atlanta series before we segue over to the Philly series, since we're working ass backwards here?
I was just gonna say with the JD thing, I think even if he's not playing, I think he's shown though he could be an impactful piece even off the bench because even if you recall to that first game, the first game of the Philly series, but in Philadelphia when he was sitting on the bench. He found Aaron Nola's when he was tipping pitches, and he told guys in that lineup, and that sparked a huge fifth inning where they scored 6 runs and they were able to blow out the Phillies in that first game. So I even think if he's not playing, he's a very valuable piece on the bench there because he's always looking at film, he's always looking for weaknesses in pitchers, and I think he could be a really good player coach in that sense. I think that's at least a huge valuable piece for him. But I mean, yeah, I mean it's pretty much like what we said before with this Atlanta series. Take care of business, win the first 2, and then we go from there.
Yeah, so we will, of course, be talking about this series at length in the coming days. Maybe do live post games after these games instead because they're a lot more meaningful. So you're probably going to hear a lot more from us with this series because this is just the beginning. And if they could just get 2, they just got to win 2, and they officially clinch a playoff spot. So we'll see how that goes. But we're going to segue now back to the Philly series, which was just chaotic at times. And then at times it was also like you knew they were going to win, especially in that third game. I probably felt the most comfortable, even though, again, the first game they were up by a lot. There was that scare in the 7th inning. But for the most part, I felt like they were in control more so in the third game. But none of these were easy games. They scraped them out, and they did have that playoff feel, especially with Citi Field just absolutely electric every single night. And it was more electric there during that series than the Padres wildcard series in 2022, which is just ridiculous. But this just, like, I was just sitting there, and anytime the crowd was just going insane, especially with Brandon Nimmo, who managed to give me the goosebumps multiple times with the home runs that he was hitting, I was just sitting there thinking, this crowd deserves October ball because the way that it was unreal. And I said going into the series, I really would love for them to find a way to win 3 out of 4 and forget about, being up on the Atlanta Braves for a second. I wanted this because to me, it felt meaningful for the Mets to find a way to, 1, spoil the Phillies' chance at winning the division in your ballpark, and 2, to show the Phillies and the rest of the league that you're not messing around. And if we see you in October, we're going to give you a run for your money. Like, we may not win the series, but we're going to at the very least be a tough out for you. And I think they sent that message very clear because in these games, especially, once again, starting pitching outside of, the second game, even the third game where Tyler McGill didn't give you volume, I think he did fine. Like, he only allowed 1 run and you got what you needed from him. But for the most part, pitching propelled yet again. Luis Severino in that game, yet again, just looking dominant. Sean Manaea allowed a couple of long balls, looked dominant. And then you even got big contributions from the bullpen yet again. There are a couple of names that are scaring me lately in the bullpen, if we're being honest here. I'm very scared when Danny Young comes into these games lately. I'm very scared when Alex Young comes into these games lately. Adam Ottavino has played himself out of the postseason roster, which he should have a while ago, but it is what it is there. But even Brazoban, I know that he let up a couple runs in that second inning, but I think lately he's showing you that if you give him 1 inning, he's more trustworthy than Adam Ottavino, in my opinion. But I think the 4th game is really where you saw this bullpen say, I'm going to hang my nuts when needed. When we thought Jose Budo would be the guy to go multiple innings, Phil Maton, the teethless man, gives you multiple innings. Jose Budo, who we thought might be, we thought he might be injured. I could say we thought he would be dead at this point, but we have not seen Jose Budo in forever. And I said it in the postgame then, maybe he just needed the additional rest, and now he's back in rhythm. And then Edwin Diaz, most of all, giving you the 6-out save. That game showed me you got some big-time pitchers in this bullpen and in this rotation. Like you said earlier, to quote Mendoza, it's time for the big boys to go out and play. You saw that with this bullpen.
I think I think in this series you really saw 2 sides of Mendoza with the bullpen usage. Because I think in that second game, while yes, Peterson wasn't great, the fact that he threw out Adam Ottavino in that situation, like I don't care if it's to just get you 1 out. that is what we saw like a couple weeks ago in the Arizona series, and I think in the Red Sox series. That was just him trying to be way too cute there. And especially with who was coming up in the lineup. I mean, you had Adam Ottavino going out there to face Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Alex Bohm. What the fuck did you think was going to happen in that situation? Like, I don't even care that it's just one out. I don't trust him against any of those guys. And again, it's true because the Phillies just blew the doors open right off there, and the Mets had no chance coming back in that game. But the final game of that series, I really liked how Mendy I liked how he handled that bullpen because I think like you mentioned, like when we were sitting there and after McGill only gave you 4 innings, we were sitting there and saying, okay, how is Mendoza going to use the bullpen for us the game to get you those last 15 outs? And out of everybody, we all would have thought that Jose Budo would have been the one that was going to be used in multi innings. Well, I mean, and that wasn't even the case because Maton really gave you 2 good innings. Budo again gave you 1 strong inning, and then Edwin Diaz in Mariano Rivera esque fashion goes out there and gives you a 6 out save. And what was even more impressive is the day before he went out and got you a 4 out save. So in the span of 2 games, he goes out and gives you 10 outs, which is that's really impressive. And I think the one thing that I really like from Diaz right now is his velo is there. He's blowing away guys with his fastball and his slider, which we saw some. Um, we were a little scared with the slider, especially because he hung that slider to both Jackson Merrill and Corbin Carroll in those Padres and Diamondback series, and they got tanked out for home runs. But right now, that slider's looking really good. I mean, listen, they're going to need Edwin Diaz in top fashion if they want to make a deep run. And right now, the way that he's looking right now, it's great, and he's really looking like 2022 Edwin Diaz. And God, if they can get this Edwin Diaz throughout the whole postseason, and because then I'm telling you, I feel like with any safe situation, then I'd feel comfortable if Edwin Diaz is coming in.
Yeah, it would be nice to get to that point where he comes into the game and it was like 2022 where you knew it was over. Like there was no chance for the opponent because in 2022, the only times he really allowed runs was when there was a cushion or when it was a non-save situation. He just needed to get work in. Those were like the only times he was allowing runs then. And right now we're seeing what we've talked about at nauseum over the past few weeks where you give him more work and he thrives. He thrives when he gets more work. And people were saying, because I saw this conversation to where it was stupid to give him the 6 out save in that game because what if you need him in Atlanta? With the off day today, I'm not worried. I think that he'll be completely fine and ready to go for tonight's game. And even then, I think that, I think the Mets have this mapped out as an ideal situation where they're going to use him tonight. Hopefully they don't have to use him tomorrow, or I should say, hopefully they do. And if they do have to use him tomorrow as well, it's because they have an opportunity to clinch a playoff spot then and there. And then you don't have to worry about Diaz's workload for the rest of the season. Just get him some work in at one point, and then, it is what it is. And I think that's the ideal mapped out plan for them right now. I have no idea though, because I'm not in those meeting rooms or anything, but I'm just assuming that's what the thought is there. But yeah, this is the time to overwork guys. And this is where it sucked at the beginning of the year when, we were pissed off at certain bullpen blips and we were pissed off at certain managerial decisions. But you also look at it now as, okay, well, maybe it's a good thing that these guys did not get heavy work in earlier in the season because now you could really pour the gas out and really empty the tanks here on these guys, especially Diaz, especially Maton, who we saw them be a little conservative with him at times when they first acquired him. And even in late August, there were times where it's like, okay, Phil Maton's in when we're up by 10 runs. What are we doing here? They're really conservative with those guys. Now I feel like Mendoza's viewing this as, all right, we got to just we got to go full throttle here and slam on the gas pedal. And you're starting to see him make those managerial decisions that you want to see him do, especially in the playoffs, because as much as we were pissed off about the situation in the second game where Ottavino was in, I love the way he managed the bullpen in the last game, because McGill, you don't waste time. You take him out. Maton comes in, and we're probably scratching our heads because we're not accustomed to, Carlos Mendoza putting a guy like Maton in when it's the 5th inning. But if you look at the part of the lineup he went against, it was that same part of the order that we talked about him putting Ottavino in. And that's what I want to see more of. You put your best relievers. How many times have I screamed in this mic about it? Put your best relievers against their best hitters. He did it with Maton and was able to get 2 innings out of him because he cruised through that first inning. Budo faces a lower part of the lineup, which I'm comfortable with because he's a guy that has struggled in high leverage situations lately. And then Diaz comes in to get the high leverage part of the order out, and I absolutely loved it. And I think we're going to see him do that more. I really think we're going to start to see. And I initially thought he was coming into the 8th inning to face that part of the lineup. And the way that I envisioned it is, okay, once he gets through Castellanos, let him go an inning and a third. Once he gets Castellanos out, pull the plug there and go to Danny Young. And even though Danny Young has been shaky lately, I looked at it as, all right, he's going to face Stott, face a lefty. He should be able to get Stott out. And if not, he shouldn't be on this roster. Real Muto, you could just walk because you don't want him to face him. And then force the hand of Rob Thompson to use that bench. And if not, he's going to roll the guns with Marsh, and I'm comfortable with him facing the lefty there. And Danny Young's got to get those batters out, and you win the game. That's what I thought. But he stuck with Diaz and went for it. Or I thought maybe, okay, put Stanek into that situation. But this is how I want to see Mendoza be come October. And I love to see the way that he managed this for the majority of this series. Because again, game 2, questionable decisions there. But outside of that, he did not mess around with a lot of it. Like even in that 3rd game, Reed Garrett got into a little bit of trouble. All right, Diaz is coming in right now. We're not going to mess around. We got to win this game. We're not going to risk losing this. And I love that. I love that he's going into this with and I know I talked about it before, how maybe he's looking at game 2 of the series as a quote unquote punt game. But I think he's of the mindset of, if we have an opportunity to win it, we're not going to mess around. We're going to make sure we win this game.
Yeah, I was surprised that Mendy gave him the 6-out save. I thought he would have done what you said, let him go through Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Alec Boehm, then go into the next inning and get Nick Castellanos out. But he stuck with it. I mean, it kind of got a little shaky because after he got Castellanos out, and at that point Diaz already had a lot of pitches thrown at that point, so you started to see the walks go a little bit. You know, he walked Bryson Stott, he stole second base. Then this is the part of the game where the game really could have just gotten out of hand, because so Bryson Stott walks, Diaz strikes out JT Realmuto on that play, and on that same play, Bryson Stott steals third base. And that ball could have easily gotten into the outfield. And at that point, I'm like, if this is how the Phillies going to tie the game, I'd be like, really? And I think, listen, Francisco Alvarez has been a lot better recently with the bat. But I think at that point, you have to just put the ball in your back pocket. Because this is not a situation where if Stott steals third base, that there's only one out, and a fly ball, sacrifice fly could get a run in. No, when he struck out Realmuto, that was 2 outs. At that point, put the ball in your back pocket and trust in your closer, and Edwin Diaz, that he could get you that final out without giving up a base hit to score the tying run. Fortunately, I mean, he threw the ball, got lucky, got a very good bounce. He walked Marsh after that, and then he struck out Cody Clemens in the game, but that that part of the game could have easily just deflated me, and it could have deflated the whole City Field, and then potentially they lose that game, and now we're heading into Atlanta with only 1 game up. But they got a good break, so that's good to see. But I think also with the rest point, I think that's a good point, because we were sitting there wondering, for a couple games now, where's Jose Budo? Where's Jose Budo? And you know what? I think Jose Budo got some deserved rest, because I think you saw that the last couple weeks he was kind of really struggling, especially with his command. And because, I mean, really, when you look back at it, over the last month or two, he was kind of one of the only guys that was really, the only reliable one in that bullpen. So they kept putting him out there, and out there. I just thought that he got a bit too tired. His command was starting to go. His sinker wasn't that sharp. His fastball wasn't that sharp. So I think he got some well-deserved rest. And now I think you see that Jose Budo is going to be back to where Jose Budo was back in like July and early August, where we can really rely on him to go out there and get you some big time outs when they need it from him.
Yeah, and he's. I mean, we have to remember this too because I think we forget it now that he's been in the bullpen for as long as he has. But this is a guy that was starting games at points earlier in this year. Like I know it's in the distant, it's in the rearview mirror, we're pretty far in our distance now. But, this is a guy that was a starting pitcher and he was used to getting the days off time and time again. And then all of a sudden he goes to the bullpen and they're using him for multiple innings. They're using him in high leverage situations and they changed how they were using him like just kind of out of nowhere and not even like giving him full rest of it. And they just was like, you know what? Yeah, we're just going to switch how we're using you. And they've changed how they've used him so much to the point where I think his arm was just getting ran into the ground. And instead of the Mets, forcing him in the games, I think they tried to stay away from him as much as possible. And that's why we saw more of Reed Garrett. That's why we saw more of Phil Maton. And even Ryan Stanek at points was getting more appearances than Jose Budo. And we rarely see Ryan Stanek. So I think that they just saw that as an opportunity and it worked out because they were able to scrape a lot of wins out without Jose Budo getting appearances. And I absolutely love that even more. And now you could go into that mindset that Mendoza keeps saying it's time for the big boys. And now that he got his rest that he needed, you're going to see a rejuvenated Jose Budo. And you need that even more now because of the Denel Nunez thing. Because if Nunez was coming back, you'd at least feel more comfortable using Budo to where, all right, at least Nunez is coming back and then we could give Budo his rest later on. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And it really freaking sucks still to this day because Nunez in this bullpen, Brooks Raley too, I mean, would be electric, but unfortunately that's not the case. And they gave him his needed rest. And that's why even Ottavino, I feel like, was forced into certain situations. Because when that game happened, the second game, we said it then, like, that would have been a spot to put Jose Budo in. Like, let him get an inning and a third, maybe 2 innings. And I know that he's not been accustomed to the 2-inning thing lately, but you know what? Maybe you could try to do that there. But I like that Mendoza is stuck to his guns and is like, you know what? We're probably not going to win this game anyway. Like, this game has got ugly very quickly. Let's just focus on giving our better guys the rest and we'll see what happens the next day. And he's kind of been doing that. And that's why we're seeing, in games that they're losing. And it sucks sometimes because some of these games maybe you could think they'll win. But, that's why we're seeing Alex Young. That's why we're seeing all these other guys. And I do wonder if now they're going to try the same a bit with Danny Young because I think that's the correlation with Danny Young struggling. How many times have we seen the Mets do a similar thing? They were using Danny Young for multiple... I mean, they have done this with multiple relievers now. Reed Garrett, they used him for multiple innings because they had nobody in the bullpen. And then they drop his workload to 1 inning. And then all of a sudden, he gets hurt. Jose Budo, same sort of deal. And now Danny Young. They used him for multiple innings so much because it was kind of like, we don't really have you in the circle of trust right now, so we're just going to give you 2 innings. Or sometimes he would work 3 outings in a row. Like, there were series, I'm pretty sure it wasn't that long ago even, like, the Red Sox series, I think he worked every game of that series, or at least close to every game of that series. But the point is that he was working a lot. And now I think the Mets realized, all right, well, we've done this with Garrett. It got him to right the ship. We did this with Budo. He's righting the ship right now. Maybe right now Danny Young is going to be put on the back burner for a bit, and they're going to try to avoid him, which it's going to be tough to run with a shorter bullpen, especially in the series. But I think they're viewing it as we want to get him right. And the way to get him right is to give him some rest and avoid running his arm into the ground further.
No, yeah, I think that correlation just totally makes sense because, like I said, we saw it early in the season with Reed Garrett. He was electric at the start of the season. They started overusing him, using him multiple innings. He got worse, eventually got hurt, went on the IL, came back, still wasn't great, but I think maybe that was just him working back into game shape. And then now we've seen that Reed Garrett has really turned back into what he was at the start of the year. Same with like Jose Budo. Like I said before, he was really, at a time, he was one of like the only guys that was really trustworthy in that bullpen. and they kept using him over and over and over again in high leverage spots to get him big outs. He didn't get to the point where he got injured, but you start to see a decline in his pitching. And sinker wasn't the same, fastball wasn't the same, was walking a lot of guys, got some rest, looked impressive in that outing. And I think, like you said, same thing about Danny Young, because I remember, like, yeah, it was the Red Sox series he was used a lot back in late August with the when they went to Colorado. I remember he was used one game to pitch an inning. Then the next game he went out there and pitched 2 innings, so 9 outs in 3 days. He has been used a lot, and I mean, listen, they had to, because, like we said, he was one of the only guys that was, one of the trustworthy guys. But I still have faith in Danny Young. I don't think, this is really who he is. I just think that, like we said, this is a case of him being overworked. I think, you give him some days off now, you let him recoup, and then hopefully, when we get into the playoffs, now Danny Young could be a very valuable left-handed weapon out of that bullpen.
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to have to be, because he's quite literally all you got lefty-wise outside of Alex Young. And Alex Young, they clearly do not trust him, and neither do I. I mean, it was fun while it lasted with the first few outings from him, and I don't know if getting sent down to AAA messed with him mentally or what, but he has not been the same since he's been called back up. And he went from a guy that I trusted to now being a guy that you got to avoid, and he's kind of just like the mop-up guy and the first guy in if they're getting killed. So for right now, yeah, they need to find a way to get him back on track, because he is going to be a vital part. And I know that you could argue that guys from the rotation are going to be in the bullpen at some point, so you don't really have to necessarily worry, because either Peterson or Quintana, one of those two lefties, are likely going to be moved to the bullpen come postseason, and there's your other lefty option. But you still want to get a guy that was giving you, quality outings and giving you big outs out of the bullpen. You want to get that back on track, and you want to get him righted, because that's just another weapon to add to your bullpen, along with the fact that you have starters that are going to turn into relievers, along with the fact that Reed Garrett has kind of found his form, even though he struggled a bit at times in the series. Edwin Diaz working right now. Hopefully Jose Budo is righted the ship. And then on top of that, you still have, hopefully Stanek could get back on track a bit. And then you have Maton as well, who had a couple of rough outings as well, and then we stopped seeing him for a bit, and all of a sudden he's working now. So I do think the Mets are just, I think as much as we get mad about certain pitching decisions in certain spots, I think that we have to understand, and it's just hard to in the moment, because it's like, fuck, they could have won this game if they made a different pitching decision. But I think that the way that they're handling this is different than in years past, where they're trying to look at the future versus just the now, where they want to get these guys right for the right time. They want to get these guys, like, if they see something's not working and somebody's struggling, okay, we're gonna pull back on your workload, because we want to conserve you to empty the tank in September and in October, when we really need those quality outs from you. So again, as much as it pissed us off that second game, to where, because who knows, maybe they still don't win if they go to Brazaban or Budo in that second game and they get that last out, and maybe it's different, maybe it's not. But all I know is that we look at it in hindsight as, all right, well, they still won the series anyway, and they got to conserve their bullpen a bit better. And now you look at it as, all right, maybe now you're going to have your better, like, maybe guys will be right come this Atlanta series, which is way more important than winning that game against the Phillies, when either way you took the series.
Yeah, I think just like you were saying about being strategic about how you deploy your bullpen throughout the whole season, I think that's why, like, it's really beneficial and it helps. And this is one of the reasons why the Mets starting the season 22-33 hurt them, because they, at that point, they really had to start winning games, start racking up games. So at that point, you really have to go to your top bullpen pieces all the time, because you have to rack up wins. You can't just keep dropping games. And this is why, hopefully next year, when the Mets do make some more improvements, hopefully they go out, they sign some big time players in the offseason. You really hope that, you don't start the season 22-33, but you hope that, you start well, you have a big time cushion at that, and then at that point, you don't feel like you have to like go out guns blazing and go like, okay, I got to go to my top bullpen guys game in game out. No, you could be a little strategic. You say, okay, this is how we're going to deploy guys here. This is how we're going to deploy guys here, and then eventually it all works out to where at the end of the season, all your top guys are rested. So then at that point, you can just go full guns blazing there. So, but that's where the Mets got themselves into that situation this year. They dug themselves early on in the season. They got out of it, but now it seems like they did kind of right the ship a little bit, and a lot of their top guys are rested. But I think for next year, like I said, you got to make sure you don't start the season 22-33 again.
Yeah, and I don't think they will. And the fact that I texted in the group chat to you, and it's just the fact that this was supposed to be a punt year and they potentially are going to be a 90-win team is just absolutely insane, especially when we went into the year thinking, all right, this is probably like a team that could range from being 5 to 10 games below 500 to 5 to 10 games above 500. Like, they are a wide range of teams. I picked them to win, I think, 87 games going into the year, and the fact that they might do better in a year that was supposedly a punt year is just, again, insane. But you're just getting the contributions from guys you did not expect, like, which will shift us over to the lineup talks, especially. Who would have thought that Jose Iglesias was going to be all this? Like, when they sign him to a minor league deal, you don't think anything of it. And then all of a sudden you get the contributions from him at the top of the lineup, filling in. And I know that we talk about Acuna because of him being position-wise, taking over for Lindor. But Iglesias is filling in big shoes for a guy that was one of, if not the best leadoff hitters in the sport. And he has been unbelievable, and he just continues to show up when needed. You have Tyrone Taylor, which I talked about ad nauseum, where I expected a bit more from him. Like, I really thought that he was going to be a little bit better than the counting numbers are, but then I also was like, all right, maybe try giving him some playing time, and maybe you'll find something there, especially when Winker was really the only guy producing from that outfield bunch, and now he's been the one cooling off, and Tyrone Taylor got the leash, and all of a sudden he's took that opportunity and ran with it, and he's looking like Eduardo Escobar in September right now at these freaking numbers. Like, I gotta pull up his September numbers. I saw someone post them earlier, but I want to just pull them up again, especially on Fangraphs, to really give you guys an idea of how good he has been this month, because it has been unbelievable, the play that you're getting from him, and even better, arguably, maybe than Escobar. So here you go. Right now, he's gotten a 181 WRC plus. Like, if you're not hip to WRC plus, that I can tell you that's very good, and that's among elite players. Like, that's like Shohei Ohtani level of numbers, and that's not an exaggeration. He's hitting 353 right now. He's only got one home run, so not giving you that much power, but let's remember, that home run could have been game-changing as well. It was like I gotta find it. I just lost it, but like 5 RBIs. He has over 1,000 OPS, 559 slugging, 450 on base percentage. Like I said, hitting 353. He has been unbelievable. WOBA 428. Like, those are elite numbers. Those are very elite numbers if you're not aware, which I think you are, especially the batting average. But regardless, yeah, he has just been giving you big contributions. Brandon Nimmo, we talked about at the deadline how he was pushing for this team to buy, and he was someone that didn't back up the word. Well, right now, he's backing up the word of the message he sent to the fans after some of these games, being like, show up to Citi Field because we're going to give you a performance. We're going to give you a show. And he has backed his word up better than anyone, because he has been hitting for power and he's been hitting in the clutch. And then on top of that, Alvarez finding his way, ignoring what Eric Chavez is saying, thankfully, hitting for freaking power right now. And then Luis Angel Acuna, first of all, badass walking up to Hakuna Matata and hitting the way he is. Second of all, the way that he's hitting right now and filling in again, shoes that were left by Francisco Lindor, even looking good defensively. I mean, who would have thought? And we said that maybe he would be some spark plug for this team. Never in my wildest dreams did I think this is what we were going to get from this kid. I mean, you're just getting the contributions from everyone, and it's that next man up mentality. And even Alonso, I know that he went 0 for 4 in that last game with 3 strikeouts, but he's been getting a couple of clutch hits, and he actually played very well defensively in that last game against the Phillies as well. You're just getting that next man up mentality, and like Alonso said, they look resilient right now.
I mean, it's kind of crazy to say, and I put this in the group chat, but kind of a hot take that if you really look back at it, the Francisco Lindor little injury here might have been the best thing that ever happened to this team, which is kind of crazy to say considering, where we kind of were after he got hurt in that first game. We were kind of panicking a little bit because we were saying, oh no, our only guy producing in the lineup is out. What's going to happen now? Are the other guys going to step up? And the other guys have answered the bell. I mean, like the 5 big guys that have really stepped up: Iglesias, Nimmo, Alvarez, Taylor, Acuna. I mean, if you look at just some of the numbers, right, and this is for the sample size is the last 2 series against the Nationals and the Phillies. I mean, Iglesias has an OPS over 1,000. Nimmo has an OPS, I think, just under 1,000. Alvarez has an OPS over 1,000. Tyrone Taylor has an OPS over 1,000, and Luis Angel Acuna has an OPS at 1,400. I mean, these guys have all stepped up and contributed in a major way. And now you're just thinking, like, if Lindor comes back and you insert his bat back into the lineup, this lineup, like we saw in July and the start of August, this could be a really dangerous lineup. And you factor that in now with the really good starting pitching, with the reliable bullpen. You're looking at it now and you're like, this team, if they get in, they could really make a deep run. And I mean, listen, first they got to get in, but it's kind of feeling like the 2015 team, but a little bit better because both teams kind of came out of nowhere. The only difference is I think this team, the lineup is a lot more, has a lot more depth in it, and a lot of guys can really step up out of nowhere and just produce.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm taking this as of right now, at least. And it's crazy that this team could win more games than that 2015 team and not win the division. Like, that just shows how thankful the Mets should be for 2015 being able to win the division with 90 wins that year, which is just insane. But regardless, yeah, this is, they're getting a lot more depth and contributions from this lineup. And I prefer this team over 2022 by a long shot, too. I mean, that 22 team, we say, I mean, I at least did for a while, and it's not like I'm patting myself on the back, but because a lot of fans saw the similar cracks, but I mean, a lot of fans wanted to ignore the fact that like late August, there was really nothing that was going for that team. Like, they were relying solely on Alonso, and if it wasn't him, you weren't getting these contributions. And then the starting pitchers not stepping up when it mattered the most. And it just felt like it was going to be, you just saw the cracks. And I think that's what took the vibe out of the stadium in that series against the Padres. Cause it was like, we shouldn't even be here right now. Like, we should be resting up, waiting for the Phillies right now. Like, that's what it felt like. But instead, no, this team right now is doing the ass opposite, and I prefer it this way because how many times have we seen teams that are hot going into October go on these runs? The Diamondbacks last year, obviously the Nationals are the best example in 2019, where they get hot at the right time and then all of a sudden World Series champions. The Phillies in 2022 get to the World Series after heating up in October. Sometimes it, you don't love it and it's not the sexy way to do it, but if they find themselves in October with the way that they're going right now, this is something that is sustainable to win them multiple rounds in the postseason. And I don't know how far they would go. We'd have to, of course, wait and see. But it's crazy right now, too, in general, just how tight this race is. Like, we don't know who the Mets are going to play. Like, in 2022, it was like, all right, if they don't get the bye, they're definitely playing the Padres. Right now, This is a wide range of teams that they could play. There's a chance they play the Diamondbacks. There's a chance that they play the Padres. There's a chance they play the Brewers. There is even an outside chance they play the Dodgers in the wild card. If the Padres sweep the Dodgers in this series, all of a sudden the Dodgers are a wild card team because the Padres would own the tiebreaker and they would just need to win like one or two more games at that point to win the division. So this is a wide range of teams that they go. There is even, it's very unlikely, but there's even probably a chance that they could face the Braves in the playoffs, hypothetically. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'm just saying possibilities here, of course. But we don't know who the hell they might face. But all I know is that right now, with the way this team is playing, and if they could just beat Atlanta and further bolster the confidence, I don't think we should be afraid of any of these teams. And I know that with San Diego, there's of course the scare of 2022, and we're scarred from that. But that's a chance to get revenge. Milwaukee has never really been a fun place for the Mets to play in, but that's a chance again to really show that you are a good baseball team by slaying your demons, like the title of the podcast says, slay your demons.
Yeah, I'm taking the same approach as like what I said with the Rangers going to the playoffs this year. Like, I don't care who the Mets play. Give me anybody, because you look, I mean, every team, because the playoffs this year are kind of a little weird. Like, every team has advantages and every team has their disadvantages. So I mean, every team looks a little bit vulnerable. I mean, sure, maybe you could say the Phillies and the Dodgers, they're the best two teams, but even like with the Dodgers, I mean, their pitching has been really diminished by injury this year. I know that, listen, they still have a great lineup with Betts, Freeman, and Ohtani. So, but every team has a hole and every team has a weakness. But yeah, like for me, going back to what I was saying, I don't care who we get, because Arizona's a tough team, the Padres are a tough team, and the Brewers are a tough team. You know what though? If I'm gonna say who I really want, give me the Padres. I want revenge for 2022. I want to like what the Padres did to Citi Field and how they quieted that building. I want the Mets to go in there and quiet Petco Park. And listen, it's going to be tough because the Padres, they have a deep starting rotation. They have superstars all throughout that lineup. But you know what? If you're going to go and win a World Series, go out there and win and beat the best teams to leave no doubt. Because I mean, realistically, look, if you face the Padres, right, then you're going to go out there and probably either face the Phillies or Dodgers in the NLDS. Then you probably have to face one of those two teams in the NLCS, and then if you make it to the World Series that far, then you're gonna have to face a tough team, whether it be the Yankees, the Orioles. So it's gonna be tough regardless of who they get.
You got to beat the best to be the best, and that's just what it comes down to. And I think that winning this series is more crucial in Atlanta too, and it's something that we forgot to even mention. I think that winning the series is more crucial in Atlanta because you don't want to put yourself to where you're going into Milwaukee and you're giving them anything, because that's a team that you could face in the postseason. You don't want to give them anything on you and let them pick up on things that they could expose in the postseason. So right now, I do lean towards them playing either the Padres or the Dodgers, depending on who wins the division in that scenario. I think it depends on that. I mean, I honestly think there's a world they could play the Dodgers right now. Like, the Padres look scary, and the Dodgers are showing a lot of weaknesses right now, but we'll have to see what happens. And I agree with you that I would lean towards wanting to play the Padres simply to kick them in the balls and get revenge, especially if you're going on this gauntlet of just overcoming your demons anyway. If you're beating Atlanta, then fuck it. Go to Petco Park and, beat the ever-living piss out of them. Like, that's what I would want to, but again, first they got to get there, and we will see how that goes. Did you want to bring up anything about the Philly series before we get to comments and everything, and just wrap things up as a whole?
No, well, I was just going to say that we might get our answer soon, because the Padres and Dodgers are actually starting a 3-game series tonight. So
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, that could change the tides entirely. Like, San Diego sweeps that series, they have the tiebreaker, and
the Padres have a tough end to the season because they have a series against the Diamondbacks and now they play the Dodgers. So it's going to be a tough 7-game tough 7 games for them to finish out the year. So you never know. Maybe they might drop in the standings, and the Mets could. Maybe if things go right, maybe the Mets could even find a way to get to get the wild card one. I know it's probably unlikely, but listen, you never know. You got to play the games for that reason.
That's the thing that I've been thinking about in my head, and I'll bring it up here. I've been having this internal battle to where I know we just talked about that we don't care who they face, but there is this part of me that would prefer to play the Dodgers over the Padres, as insane as that sounds, because it's the Dodgers. But then there's also this part of me that is hoping the Dodgers just sweep the Padres and the Mets find a way to claw their way into the wild card one spot and then face the Padres at Citi Field and really slay their demons, because you're going to have an even more electric crowd at that point behind you at Citi Field than it was in 2022, because that crowd is going to be dying for blood, dying for revenge of what we didn't get in 2022. That's where I have that internal battle in my head. I would probably lean towards that, to where I'd rather them just find a way to get wildcard one, and then all of a sudden they get to really potentially slay their demons. As much as it would be fun to silence the Padres in Petco Park, I'd freaking love to be at some wildcard games in Citi Field. But we'll see what happens there. We will address comments quickly, concerns, and all of that. Before we do, I do want to quickly touch on the Kodai Senga news. He's not coming back for the regular season. Will he come back for the postseason? I don't know at this rate. I would just shut him down if I were the Mets, because you don't want to risk any long-term effects. And the Mets have got here without Senga. Like, outside of that one game he pitched, they've got here without him. I don't think you need to really push this any more than you are. And as fun as it would be to have Senga back, and as cool as it would be, you've got here without him. I think at this point, just roll without him. And like, realistically, what are you going to get from him anyway? Like a 1 inning appearance out of the bullpen every now and then. Like, to me, I don't see the need to rush him back anymore. And it sucks because it's a tricep thing. It's not like, although I don't know if it's better or worse that he didn't re-aggravate the injury and it's something different from the calf and it's a tricep thing. I don't know what's better. I don't know what's worse. But all I know is that this was the risk when they signed Senga, is that injuries pop up with him quite a bit. They got lucky with it last year, and it sucks because I would have took the trade off of him being a little more banged up last year to have that Senga this year. But again, they've got here without him, and at this point, don't rush anything.
I mean, yeah, listen, it's unlucky. Obviously, you do want him in an ideal situation, but like we said, they've gotten to this point without him, so they could just easily finish the job without him. So, I mean, listen, I do trust Senga in the sense that he even said that unless he feels 100%, he's not going to force himself back into the rotation or a bullpen spot. So if I feel like if he thinks he's 100% ready to go and he could give valuable outside of that bullpen, then I would insert him back into it, because I mean, listen, he would help that bullpen pretty much, because he could give you maybe 2-3 innings out of that bullpen and give you some long relief outings if needed. But like I said before, and like I said, he even said that if he doesn't feel 100%, he's not going to force himself into the rotation. So I trust him in that sense. But yeah, listen, it sucks, but injuries happen, and they just got to go. They just got to go about it without him at this point.
With that said, we'll address comments before we wrap this up. We touched on this a bit in the opening. We believe that there should just be a neutral site played for this series, and it would suck, be worst case scenario if they have to face Sale twice, but I'm not really going to go too in-depth again on those thoughts if you want. I hate to be this way, but you could go back to the beginning to hear the in-depth thoughts. But to sum up what we thought when we were talking about it, it would suck, and we just think that they should play at a neutral site. And I disagree with this. Lindor's back injury is probably going to be a thing for the rest of his career. It's a back injury. It happens, and Bryce Harper deals with it too. Bryce Harper's been dealing with a back injury this entire season, dealing with a elbow injury this entire season, and he's putting up good numbers. Like, it's going to be what it is, unfortunately, with Lindor, and they're going to need him. They're going to need him down the stretch here, and if it's something that, if he really physically can't play, then fine, I would agree there, but if he feels ready, then put him in the lineup.
Yeah, no, with Lindor, I mean, even he said before when he went down with the injury that he said he was already playing with back pain, so he was still producing at a rate where even he felt a little pain. But and even he said, I think it was after the final game of the Phillies series that he said that he doesn't want to go out there and play injured to the point where he's a net negative out there in the field. So similar to what Kodai Senga said, that like Lindor's the same way. If he feels 100% he's good to go, then fine, put him back. But if he doesn't feel like he's 100% ready to go, then I don't. He's not going to insert himself back into the lineup because that's what a real captain does. A real captain, not like certain other people who wear number 8 and get paid $8 million a year. But I digress. We won't get into that topic.
To wrap things up, the Mets are going to be signing one of the better international prospects, the second best one ranked. Elian Pena, a left-handed bat, throws with his right hand, a shortstop prospect this is just like gross to say. He's 16 years old and born in '07 is just like, that makes me feel weird. I don't like that. I really don't. I don't like how much older I am than these players coming into the league anymore. It doesn't feel right, but he's got a 65 graded hit tool, according to Pipeline, at age 16 years old. That's some legit stuff. I obviously will trust anything at this rate that a certain somebody does, but with that said, yeah, I'm excited to see what happens there, if there's truth to that, because we have to remember the Mets were linked to apparently sign Soto's brother at one point, and then last minute he goes to the Nationals. But if there's truth to that, I'm excited. A shorter kid, and the best way to build your prospect pool is to get guys that play up the middle. So who knows if he's going to stick at shortstop. Mark Vientos was a shortstop when they got him. He's obviously moved to third base, and there's a couple other prospects that the Mets have acquired, whether it's the draft, trade, whatever, that were shortstops and that ended up moving. So these guys don't always stick, but if he does stick, cool. But it's also going to be hard to, with Lindor, of course, being here for the next however many years. But yeah, give your brief overall thoughts, and then we'll wrap things up.
I mean, I never heard of the kid before today, so I don't really know
Did
too
I?
much about him. So I can't go into high depth, but I mean, pretty much what the scouting grades say. I mean, 65 hit, 50 for power, 50 for running, 50 for arms, 60 for fielding, 60 overall. I mean, at least from the numbers point of view and the scouting grades, I mean, that looks pretty good. And listen. Right now, I'm trusting what David Stern's doing. So if he feels like this is a guy that we need to sign, because even if he doesn't make the team, even if he later on he doesn't make the team, he could be a very valuable trade piece. Like we've seen what like the Dodgers have done over the last couple of years, and what the Padres have done. They stacked up these young kids in the Ross on the down in the minors, and eventually when a big time a guy becomes available through the trade market, you can trade some of these guys. And and it won't be like over the last couple of years, like what the Mets have done, when they'll trade some of the prospects, and then the prospect pipeline is barren. No, because at that point now, building up the farm system, so now you're gonna have a surplus of guys. So I mean, yeah, they're saying that he's a 5 tool guy, but 16 years old. It's going to be a couple years before he's even up here or anywhere close to being up here. So we're just going to give it some time and see what he does in the minors when he eventually comes over to the States.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens with everything, and we will be bringing you guys content with this Brave series, like I said, really heavily, because of the fact that it is a significant series. So maybe some live post games and some other additional content coming your way. But yeah, that is going to be it for us. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching the latest episode. Do not forget to leave a like if you haven't already. Don't forget to subscribe. Turn on your notifications so you know when we upload or go live on the channel next. And we will see you guys in the next one.